After the funeral, Larissa found a note in her father's jacket. "Daughter, come to my grave tomorrow at..." My father was in the ground, but somehow he was still leaving me instructions. Why would a dying man hide a note in his own jacket, addressed to his daughter, and bury a secret at his own grave? Because he knew exactly what was coming. And he spent his final weeks making sure it wouldn't work. This is the story of a note, a key, a USB drive, and a brother who thought a dying man's love for his daughter was something he could just outmaneuver. He was wronged, and I'm Larissa, 29, a paralegal living just outside Columbus, Ohio. I'm methodical. I keep records. I reread contracts before I sign them, and I follow up on everything in writing. I say all of that up front because what I'm about to describe sounds like the plot of a movie, and I need you to understand that it wasn't.
It was 6 months of my life.
It was my father's death. And I have court documents, recorded audio, and a probate judge's ruling to back up every single word. My father was 61 when he died. He'd been managing a cardiac condition for about 3 years, a digoxin-regulated arrhythmia that his cardiologist had largely stabilized. His last major checkup, for months before he died, showed numbers his doctor described as encouraging. He was careful with his diet. He wasn't drinking. He was doing the things you do when you take your health seriously because you've been scared once already. Then, in the span of about 2 weeks, he deteriorated without warning. Hospitalized on a Monday. Dead by Friday. Heart failure, the death certificate said. Consistent with his existing condition. I flew in from Columbus the day he was admitted. My brother had been living with our father for the past 2 years, theoretically to help manage Dad's small landscaping business, practically to live rent-free and keep himself positioned as the essential son while I was 4 hours away building a career. He was already at the hospital when I arrived. He looked grief-stricken in the way that people look grief-stricken when they've been practicing. The funeral was on a Saturday in late October. Gray sky, cold ground, about 40 people who genuinely loved my father filing past a casket that still didn't seem real to me. I spoke. I said true things that felt insufficient. My brother stood beside me in a suit I'd never seen before. He'd gone shopping at some point in the 4 days between our father's death and his burial, which I filed away without knowing yet why it bothered me. After the service, back in my father's house, I told my brother I'd start sorting through personal items in the bedroom.
He was fine with that.
He disappeared into the back office and started making phone calls, which struck me as odd for a man who was supposed to be grieving, but I didn't say anything. I went through my father's closet methodically.
Shoes.
Folded sweaters. A row of hanging jackets. I was deciding what to keep and what to donate, the practical work that falls on someone when the family needs it done, when I reached the gray wool blazer. He'd worn it to every formal occasion as long as I could remember. Church. Holiday dinners. My college graduation. I checked the pockets out of habit. Right pocket, empty. Left outer pocket, a folded receipt from a pharmacy, dated 3 weeks ago. Inside breast pocket, a piece of paper, folded in quarters. I thought it was a business card. I almost set it on the nightstand without opening it. His handwriting stopped me the second I unfolded it. Shaky in places, slow in others, but absolutely his. Daughter, come to my grave tomorrow, at sunrise. Look beneath the stone angel's left wing. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I was alive. Don't trust what your brother shows you. Don't sign anything. Get a lawyer first. I love you, Dad. I read it 4 times standing in his closet with his jackets around me. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed, and I stayed there for a long time. He had written this knowing he was going to die. Knowing, not fearing, knowing what was going to happen after he did. I didn't sleep that night. I was at the cemetery before sunrise. My father's plot was new, the soil still disturbed, next to a decorative stone angel that marked an older neighboring section. The angel faced east. Its left wing arched downward and back, creating a shallow, sheltered hollow where the granite base met the ground. I knelt in the frozen grass and pressed my fingers along the edge of the stone. Felt something solid. Pulled it loose from the dirt. A waterproof black case, the kind used for outdoor equipment. Rubber sealed. Inside a Ziploc bag to double the protection. Inside the case, a USB drive. a handwritten letter, and a small brass key with a paper tag that read, in my father's handwriting, First Federal, Box 447. I sat in the grass next to my father's grave in the cold and read the letter. He'd written it in sections over multiple days. The handwriting changed partway through, became slower and more labored toward the end. He'd been deteriorating when he wrote the final pages. He wrote that for the past 8 months my brother, had been pressuring him consistently and sometimes aggressively to update his estate documents. That there had been arguments. That my brother had told him, repeatedly, that I didn't care about the family. That I had moved on. That I would liquidate everything the second I inherited it. He wrote that my brother had positioned himself as the only person my father could trust, and that he had done it gradually enough that my father hadn't recognized it as a pattern until it was well underway. Then he wrote the part that made me stop breathing for a moment. I think your brother has been interfering with my medications. I cannot prove this, but I have noticed on several occasions that my pills looked different than I expected, color variation that shouldn't exist in the same bottle. I started hiding my prescribed pills and quietly purchasing a separate supply from a different pharmacy. I felt better for a few weeks. Then I started deteriorating again, and I realized I couldn't rule anything in or out. I should have called you. I was ashamed of how far I had let this go, and I kept hoping I was wrong about him. He'd set up a voice recording on his phone, a simple app running in the background. Every conversation with my brother over the previous 4 months, he had recorded. The USB drive contained all 12 recordings. I went to the bank the moment it opened. Safe deposit box 447 held 3 things. My father's original will, signed and notarized 3 years ago, leaving the house, the business, and all accounts to me with a nominal provision for my brother, a folder of business account statements with certain transactions circled in red pen, and a sealed personal letter from his cardiologist. The cardiologist's letter was not an official clinical document. It was handwritten, personal, clearly not intended for legal use, but my father had asked him to write down what he knew. It said that a man identifying himself as my father's son had called the cardiology office approximately 7 months prior, asking detailed questions about what would happen clinically if a patient on a specific digoxin regimen accidentally double-dosed over an extended period. The receptionist had flagged the call as unusual. The doctor had made a private note and mentioned it to my father at his next appointment. My father had asked him to put it in writing. The doctor had obliged. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot with all of it in my lap. Then I called an attorney. 2 days after the funeral, my brother filed a probate claim with the Franklin County Probate Court. He presented a new will, dated 8 months prior, signed in my father's name, witnessed by 2 individuals I didn't recognize, that left him the business, the property, and the bulk of all financial accounts. I was mentioned. I received a nominal sum that wouldn't have covered 2 months of rent. He called me that evening. His voice was measured and reasonable, like he was explaining something unfortunate, but inevitable. Dad updated his will last year, he said. I know this is hard to hear, but he had concerns about the estate, and he made his wishes clear. I think he felt like you'd built your own life out there, and he wanted to make sure the business stayed in the family. I see, I said. You should get the paperwork within the week. The attorney's already handling it. I think the best thing is if we just let the process run and keep things civil. Sure, I said. That was the entire conversation. He interpreted my calm as resignation. He had no idea I'd spent the previous 48 hours with a probate attorney reviewing the contents of a waterproof case I'd pulled from the dirt at my father's grave. What followed over the next month was an extended demonstration of my brother's absolute certainty that he would win, and his willingness to do whatever it took to make sure of it. He started with the soft approach. He had a cousin reach out to me, not to pass condolences, it turned out, but to deliver a message. My brother had asked our cousin to tell me that if I signed a disclaimer of interest, foregoing any challenge to the will, this could all stay quiet and dignified, and I'd save myself the cost of a legal fight I wouldn't win. Our cousin, to his credit, was visibly uncomfortable delivering this. He told me what he'd been asked to say, apologized, and told me he thought my brother had been off for months. I thanked him. I told him not to worry about it. I did not sign anything. When that didn't work, his attorney sent a letter to my attorney that was technically professional but carried a specific subtext. The letter referenced my emotional state following a difficult loss and suggested that grief can sometimes impair judgment in ways that complicate the decision-making process. It was a documented intimidation tactic, framing any challenge I made as the irrational behavior of an unstable, grieving woman. My attorney had seen it before. She flagged it, documented it, and kept moving. Then he got to my father's business partner. This man had worked alongside my father for over a decade. He was in his late 60s, semi-retired, and not someone with a full grasp of what he was being asked to do. My brother had visited him privately and walked away with a signed statement claiming my father had expressed reservations about my financial responsibility. When I called the business partner myself and explained what was happening, calmly, walking him through the timeline, he was genuinely horrified. He hadn't understood the context. He signed a corrected affidavit within the week. Then came the move that cost my brother everything. One of my father's long-term employees, a man who'd been with the landscaping business for 7 years and clearly respected my father, received a phone call from my brother. My brother offered him $3,000. In exchange, the employee would provide a signed statement saying he had personally witnessed my father express a wish to leave the business to my brother. The employee called my attorney's office directly to report it. That conversation was documented in a sworn statement. Offering money to a witness to influence their testimony is subornation of perjury under Ohio law. It is also witness tampering under ORC 2921.04. My brother had done it from his personal cell phone. In Ohio, a will contest must be filed within 3 months of the probate court admitting the will. We were well within that window. My attorney filed a formal contest on grounds of undue influence, fraud, and improper execution, supported by the recordings, the original will from the safe deposit box, the business account statements, and the employee's sworn statement about the bribery attempt. My brother's response was to hire a more aggressive private attorney and file a motion arguing that the USB recordings were obtained improperly. My attorney addressed this directly. Under Ohio's one-party consent law, a participant in a conversation may legally record that conversation without informing the other party. My father was a participant. The recordings were admissible. The depositions of the fake will's witnesses were where the case broke open. Both witnesses were deposed under oath. The first witness gave vague, inconsistent answers about the circumstances of the signing. The second witness, a younger man, visibly uncomfortable throughout the entire deposition, ultimately admitted that he had not been present when my father signed the document. He had signed blank witness lines at my brother's request, after the fact, at a separate location. He said my brother had told him it was just a formality. Under Ohio Revised Code 2107.03, a valid will requires 2 witnesses present at the time of signing. Signing witness lines after the fact, at a different location, without witnessing the testator's signature, is not valid execution. The will was fatally defective on its face, once that admission was on the record. 11 weeks after my brother filed his probate claim, the Franklin County Probate Court declared the new will invalid. My father's original will, the one he had stored in that safe deposit box, the one that left everything to me, was admitted to probate. That was the civil portion. The criminal portion took longer, but it was more complete. The Elder Financial Exploitation Investigation, which had been running parallel through the Ohio Attorney General's office under ORC 1337.36, uncovered something my father had only partially documented. The circle transactions in the business account statements told part of the story. My brother had been writing checks from a company account to a limited liability company he'd registered in a slightly different name. A shell entity, created approximately 14 months prior, that existed for no operational purpose. Over those 14 months, he had transferred just under $47,000 out of the business through that entity. The recordings supported the financial picture in ways even my father hadn't fully recognized. Several of them captured my brother pressuring my father to approve expense payments without reviewing the documentation. In one recording, my father said, "I'd like to look at the receipts before I sign off," and my brother's response was, "You don't need to go through all that. I already handled it. Just sign." You can hear my father's pen on the paper 8 seconds later. In another recording, the one that I've listened to probably 30 times because I still can't fully accept what it sounds like, my brother told my father, "If you keep second-guessing everything, you're going to end up alone, and I'm not going to be responsible for what happens to you." My father said nothing. The recording just captured him breathing. Between the $47,000, the fraudulent will, the false witnessing, and the bribery attempt, my brother was charged with 3 felony counts: theft from an elderly person under ORC 2913.02, a felony of the 3rd degree; forgery under ORC 2913.31, a felony of the 4th degree; and witness tampering under ORC 2921.04, a felony of the 3rd degree. He hired a private defense attorney. He posted bond. He showed up at my father's house, which was now legally mine, twice. The first time, I didn't answer the door. The second time, he sat on the porch for 20 minutes before leaving. I had security footage of both visits. He called me from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail both times. The first voicemail was an apology. Long, circular, full of phrases like, "You have to understand what I was dealing with," and "Dad wasn't always thinking clearly" at the end. Nothing about what he'd actually done. Just context. Just reasons. The second voicemail was a threat. Vague enough that his attorney later characterized it as grief and frustration, but specific enough that my attorney filed for a civil protection order the next morning. The court granted it. The medication question was the one that never fully resolved, and I've had to make peace with that. The investigation found no physical evidence of tampering, no residual medication irregularities that could be traced retrospectively. My father's death was consistent with his existing cardiac condition. The medical examiner's report didn't change. The phone call to the cardiologist's office, my father's written statement, and the pattern of behavior were all circumstantial. Without a direct evidentiary chain, the DA declined to file charges related to the death itself. I've sat with that. I don't have an answer. What I have is my father's letter, in his own handwriting, describing what he suspected in the months before he died. And I have the knowledge that he was right about everything else he told me. My brother accepted a negotiated plea approximately 8 months after my father's death. He pled guilty to the forgery count and the theft count. The witness tampering charge was dropped as part of the agreement. He received 3 years of community control supervision, probation, mandatory repayment of the $47,000 with interest, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent felony record. He is prohibited from serving in any financial or fiduciary capacity in Ohio for 10 years. He lost any interest in the business through the civil proceedings. My father's business partner and I restructured the company. We kept the name. We kept the crew. We're doing fine. My brother moved. I don't know where, and I haven't tried to find out. I kept the gray wool blazer. It hangs in my closet at the house, my father's house, now mine. I don't wear it. I just know where it is. My father spent his last coherent week sick, scared, and still protecting a son who was stealing from him and pressuring him to sign documents that would cut his daughter out of everything. He couldn't bring himself to call me directly. I think he was ashamed of how far it had gone, and I think he was hoping, until close to the end, that he was wrong about his own son. But he wasn't passive. He wasn't helpless. He recorded every conversation. He secured his original will. He got his doctor to write down what he knew. He found a waterproof case and buried it in the one place he knew I would look if he asked me to. He said in the note that he was sorry he couldn't protect me while he was alive. He did more than he knew. My father hid evidence at his own grave and left me a literal treasure map to take down the person who is stealing from him, and all you have to do to make sure you catch the next story like this is hit subscribe. He did months of covert reconnaissance from a hospital bed. You just have to click a button. He would want you to S.O. My brother pressured a dying man to sign a fake will, funneled $47,000 out of the family business through a shell company, tried to bribe a witness with $3,000 cash, and called me on a blocked number to leave a threatening voicemail. And he still thought he was going to walk away clean. Here's my question for you. If you had found that note in the jacket, the one that just said, "Come to my grave at sunrise, look beneath the angel's wing," Would you have gone? Or would you have assumed it was nothing and moved on? Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever had a family member treat inheritance like a personal project they just needed to manage correctly, subscribe, because these stories don't stop, and neither do we.